And hello, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and today we are talking about money. And with us is Stacey Tisdale, financial writer, author of The True Cost of Happiness, the real story behind managing your money. And she created an award-winning program for children and money management called Winning Ways, and has an exciting new initiative centered around Black women and their money. So much to talk about today. Thank you so much.
A lot to talk about.
For being with us today. That whole idea of Black women and their money is a crucial, important subject to tackle, and you are doing it in many, many ways.
It's what was interesting to hear you say, you know, we're talking about money, because when we talk about money, we're talking about a lot more than money. And
we're talking about how we feel about ourselves,
exactly,
and
how
we
we
experience our world and our sense of worth, all of which I know from reading your books, your material. So thank you very much. But tell us first about yourself. An interesting story, because we say place yourself in Black America, and that's not exactly what happened to you.
yes, you're going way back. Okay, back at the beginning. So I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut. My mother was an educator. She started as a teacher, as a principal. There's a school named after her in Bridgeport, Stacey Tisdale Elementary School. And my father now runs the biggest anti-poverty agency in the state of Connecticut, Action for Bridgeport Community Development. He only had a brief 4-year stint away from that. Since I've known him, he was an economic advisor for President Carter. So I've always grown up in very political situations. My parents were civil rights activists. So,
and a big world, too, if advising President Carter.
Yes.
That's not just your tiny little village. That's a big world.
Right. My father was the first Black to get the Democratic nomination for Congress in the 4th District of Connecticut.
Right.
So it was always a very I was always really immersed in several different communities. And if you're familiar with the socioeconomics of Fairfield County, Connecticut, it's very interesting because you have Greenwich, Connecticut, Westport, Connecticut, some of the wealthiest areas in the nation, juxtaposed to Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is you know, the most impoverished city. And my family was pretty upper middle class, living in a lake community in Bridgeport, but they wanted me to go to school at a private school in Westport, Connecticut, as all parents, you know, thinking they're doing the best for their children.
Right, right.
The experience is different than a lot of people realize, and as we've discussed before, there's a big difference between racism, which I experienced, you know, quite a bit at that school, but also isolationism is very different, and
which doesn't have a cruel aspect to it, even though it turns out being cruel. But it's just that you're alone.
It's different, and I'm so happy to see that there's been a lot of research and expertise in this area now. The human brain, as you know, a lot of my money research, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, is really on behavioral finance, how the brain actually processes things, actually values itself by comparing itself to things around this. And these are critical in our early childhood development stages. So when there's nothing like you around you, you come up with, you know, different coping strategies to fit in. There was also, you know, there's bullying associated with isolationism. And, you know, a lot of us know what it's like to be the only, you know, the only Black. And there's one of the experts in this field, when she speaks to white people about this, she said, imagine walking into a Black church, that feeling you get, and feeling like that all the time, and having that become your normal state of being.
So it seems to me that this is the rethinking that needs to be done when your child has a fantastic educational opportunity, but they will be the first, still at this stage, could be the first and the only child, Black child, in a non-Black and totally non-Black environment. And what you're suggesting is that the critical research that's being done indicates that this is not healthy, it's not a good thing.
It's what the research that I've seen has shown, that there are patterns. there was a great documentary that some parents did about their child's experience at Dalton.
Right, I saw that.
Yes.
I saw that.
And the isolationism part of it, one of the challenges is, you know, fitting into these communities. And for a lot of people, you know, they're coming from lower income communities. They're being brought into this community, so they don't have anything in common economically as well. The kids aren't going on vacation. They're not going to each other's houses. They're not doing these types of things. But one of the most challenging aspects of racial isolation is that you don't, when you go back to your own community, you're not black enough.
Right.
You have kids.
I saw those kids
yeah.
in the Dalton documentary.
Yeah.
Not all of them made it through Dalton.
Yeah.
They were like, get me out. So
Yeah, that's one of the hardest aspects of it. When you come back into your own
Sure.
community, you're not black enough. So what do, you know, human beings do? You try to fit in.
Right.
And what's interesting to me is I see this in spending patterns. There's research, people who grow up in, you know, isolated communities, they tend to be overspenders. There's, you know, all sorts of emotional and psychological impacts that, you know, there's tools out there to navigate. Mm-hmm. And parents and schools should really, you know, educate teachers on how to deal with kids in these situations.
Yeah, how to deal with not going to Switzerland on vacation to ski, you know? I mean,
Yeah, when you come home and that's what your friends are talking
Right.
about.
Exactly.
You have nothing, you know, having nothing in common with
But
them.
at 11, so you had this experience, but at 11 you became an ice skating star. I mean, this is such a great story, which also had its challenges. So you were, at 11 you left home.
I did leave home at 11. I was a figure skater, and I had some talent. And Carlo Fossi, who was actually, this is really dating me, Dorothy Hamill's coach, wanted to work with me. My parents and I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity,
Sure.
so I went to, he was in Denver, Colorado, and I moved there. And then as you evolve in skating and you work with different coaches and different things, I ended up living in Janesville. I ended up living in Lake Placid, Janesville, Wisconsin,
Right.
Lake Placid, New York, and in Denver, Colorado.
The skating centers.
And
of-
I
of the
ended up
country,
living in the
right.
skating centers,
Right.
which for me, I don't know if you're consciously doing it at 11, but I think one of, you know, embracing leaving was also leaving that situation that I was in. Because
Sure.
one of the traits of racial isolation is the child rarely discusses what's going on with their parents because they feel the sense of responsibility and the sense of, you know, that how badly their parents.
Sure.
want
How
to
could you
be.
turn down this
Yeah.
opportunity?
Yes,
Right.
and
Right.
They,
yeah.
So I think you know, that was great for me,
Right.
but not realizing I was going from out of the frying pan into quite the fires.
The fires.
Living in
Right.
places like that were, you know, I was the only African American in the town, and not, you know, you just go through experiences like never. I was always popular. People were very kind, but you're never going to be doing things like going to proms. You're
Right.
never going to be doing, you know, those types of things, and it's difficult because when I think. With athletes,
Sure.
you know, artists, when, you know, you have to start nurturing that talent so young that I see from my work in finance what a huge impact you know, those early
Those early years,
conditioning
those
have on your
influences.
behavior.
Right.
So that's something that all families need to consider, you know, closely, that, you know, they're not the ones who are their child's first line of fire, first line of teaching.
Right.
So it's just, you know, it was a wonderful. We're talking about the challenges of it. You know, how beautiful of an experience was
Sure,
it
sure.
than my the
But
sacrifice.
now
of my
this led you, yeah, to this great financial career where you worked for the biggest and the best financial papers and television stations and all of that. Have this career, and now you're focusing on black women. We've got this conference coming up that I'm happy to be participating in.
Yes.
Tell us about that. It's of course Gloria Steinem and who else?
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's talk about that on June 26th at the Paley Center here in New York City. Carol will be joining feminist icon Gloria Steinem, Breakfast Club host Angela Yee, Grace Vanda Cruz, who's an amazing woman who founded Grace Capital, but she's a great story, and Rianka Dorsonville, who started Young Gen, which is just a financial empowerment movement largely focused on millennials. And
I'm a little afraid because you say that we're going to have an audience of 11 million people.
Yes.
So yes, Stacey says, of course, 11 million.
We're doing this in media partnership with
Great.
Grio.
Excellent.
Grio.com. Everyone can follow this on.
Yeah.
And
So if you're watching this at a different date, you'll see this taped, and you'll also see that taped. So you can access that as well.
Yeah.
So we're not dating anything here. But I think that the title is so interesting to me because it's Black Women, Feminism, and Empowerment. And you're talking about money. So Black women and feminism is sometimes not, two words that you see next to each other, although we both know we're both feminists, so we understand that. But what's the purpose, the idea of it?
This, excuse me, the idea came about because Gloria Steinem and I were together about a year and a half ago, and we were going to an event. And I was a senior editor at a black media company. And I'm like, well, what should I talk to you about? I'm sitting, what? We're sitting here, what can we talk about? So we got on the topic of black women and feminism. And Gloria is so associated with the feminist movement, but she was, black women started the feminist movement. She's like, I was there. She worked for Angela Davis. She worked, with all of these wonderful women at the very beginning, and it's really an untold story about the role that black women played in the feminist movement. And if you go back, Madam C.J. Walker, you go back into your own family's history, and you see what a role black women played. But the purpose of this event is to kind of change the internal and external dialogue around black women and women in general, particularly for me, because I'm a financial expert, through their financial lens.
Right.
And what the situation that we have here is, we know when we talk about black wealth that we always talk about bottom end of the gap. Black women talk about pay gap. Black women are at the lowest end of the pay gap, earning 68 cents for every dollar that men make. All of these types of things. But in reality, black women are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in the United States. The numbers of businesses created by African American women is up 300%. I'm sure we're going to talk about the financial history of blacks, but the headlines are, black households in the United States earning $75,000 or more, or $200,000 or more, are the fastest growing income groups. So blacks and black women are a tremendous story of resilience, but in order to really step into our wealth, and we have tremendous wealth,
$1 trillion,
over $1 trillion in buying power. In order to step into that, our internal and external dialogue has to change. And I know consciousness raising is actually a tool in behavior change. So I want to hear black women and women all over, to hear black women spoken about in this way. We're not, okay, I'm not going to be defined by a pay gap or whatever. Look what we did anyway. Look what we did.
Yeah, we created all of these businesses.
We created all of these businesses.
Making progress. So we need to change the internal dynamic. One of the things that I've always loved about your work is your work with children. And I want to show a clip of you with Winning Plays talking to some high school and college kids. And let's take a look at that clip, and we'll talk on the other side.
Thanks.
You are already perfect. If you don't believe this, it is due to a poverty of your understanding. Get rid of that understanding, and you will become rich.
That's what I would love to teach to people, that we are already perfect. Everything that you want to accomplish in your life, all your dreams, all your goals, you were already built to do that.
I've been a financial journalist for 20 years, and that's given me a very unique vantage point to see how people relate to money. I became very frustrated watching how much people struggle with money. Winning Plays is a financial education program targeted for high school and college students. It really has them examine the fact that how they feel about themselves is going to have a lot to do with how they feel about money.
college kids. But what if I don't pull my grades up for a scholarship? Graduation around the corner, what will my life be?
It's a wonderful program. The part that I like the most is the fact that before we even tackle the financial literacy part, students are attuned to what's important as far as their goals, as far as decisions, good financial decisions, bad financial decisions, and how to change those decisions.
This class helped me a lot because in the long run, I think I would have more money. Because right now, before, when I didn't have personal finance class, when I had money, I would just go buy shoes and clothes and just buy stuff. But now, like, I took the class, I learned more about how to save money and how to think about the long run.
So there we have it, and I think that people of any age need that kind of reworking so that they understand what they're doing when they spend their money.
They need to, it really comes down, we need to understand how we work a little bit. And our behavior is really the result of conditioning. And how this came about for me is, you know, I've had whatever, I think at some point we realized that we're not of our own creation, and whatever message was meant to come through me took me on this journey that put me at these amazing news organizations. My career started out on Wall Street, and when I realized I wanted to do something different, I knew finance, I loved writing, and I literally picked up the Wall Street Journal and called them, and they bought that story, and I started at one of their newswire services. And then I moved into television, Wall Street Journal TV, which eventually became CNBC. So I worked at Wall Street Journal, then I went to CBS, then I went to CNN,
Today Show.
So
you were
all these different places, and what that did was give me a unique vantage point to see how people relate to money, and I got very saddened, disheartened by what I saw, because it was
why saddened? What about people relating? We know that they love rich people, you know, I mean, and they respond to wealthy people more positively than poor people. Is that the kind of sadness or just what people were doing with their money?
Not at all. Money is we call money a leading cause of financial stress. We call money a leading cause of divorce. We blame a lot of bad behavior on money.
Right.
And what I could see was that, wealthy people have just as much
Stress.
anxiety over money. We all have the same emotions, just different storylines to get us there. So I remember I was literally on the floor of the stock exchange for CNN one day, and my first report was, here's 5 tips to help you get out of credit card debt. And my next report was the average American family has $9,000 in credit card debt. And I'm like, what is it about money that we just can't get it right? So I went on I had no idea it was going to be a 6-year research project into what drives financial behavior, and the problem became very clear, is that when we have trouble with money, we go straight to the numbers. I have to save more, earn more, invest more. But the real causes of our financial experience have got nothing to do with numbers at all. It's much more a function of conditioning. The way we saw money handled or not, discussed or not, when we were growing up, that's when our little grooves are set in our brain. That's how we think we manage money. The messages society gives us about gender. Men are told from day one that it's their job to provide and protect. Women literally value themselves on how they nurture. We see this play out in the pay gap, but what I would push people to examine about that also, and we're working hard on the social change there, the governmental change on that, but I'll share a story. A friend of mine was the head of wealth management at a big investment company, and she had 2 students from Harvard come in, a man and a woman, and she said they were identical on paper. I think they'd done the same activities. And she was interviewing them both separately, and when it came to time to ask for what they were thinking salary, the woman said, whatever you're thinking,
I'll take it.
We'll be fine. And the man was very clear.
Right.
And this has to do with our conditioning. And this isn't about judging our decisions. It's about knowing our tendencies so that we can compensate for them. Like I always tell women, we're going to have that tendency, so know the fair market salary before you sit down for a job interview. Know the fair, women are going to get higher prices for loans. One of the exercises in the Winning Plays curriculum is to ask a student how a man or a woman treated differently, for them to examine a case study when they walk into a car dealership. Mm-hmm. And we all know they're very clear on the reasons for
even
women.
though women buy most of the cars.
Yes. But so it's up to us to be empowered, knowledgeable consumers.
Right. I mean, people used to say, well, they pick out the color, and they say, no, they buy the cars.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
but yet they're still, to some degree, although we see more advertising aimed at women now in purchasing.
Because more women are the primary breadwinners in homes.
Right. Amy. So, so understanding how you personally were related to money, I mean, placed in that relationship to money, but also the history of it. I love the research that you've done about that. When I was reading about the Freedom Bank, we have a notion that we really haven't participated in the money scene at all. But the Freedom Bank, created by Abraham Lincoln, I mean, it's a piece of history that, that skipped me, I think, because I didn't know. Tell the story. What I didn't know was that the contributors lost all of their money after putting it in. So
that's one of several examples. Again, what I'm trying to do with my work is to change the conversations and to change our internal and external dialogue, and so that we can really step into our power. And as a financial journalist, the financial history of blacks is, without question, one of the greatest stories of resilience in modern history. And I was recently speaking to some young girls, and I said to them, what do you think about when you think about blacks and money? And they raised their hand. They're like, not good with money, don't, take on a lot of debt, all these negative things. And, what was sad for me to see is they were talking about themselves.
Right.
And the truth is, and this was amazing, information is so powerful. After this conversation, they, had a different, skip in their step. When Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and I'm talking, just showing you our financial history, he gave them some commerce. Smart man, and he said, I can't, give people money who've been enslaved and they've never managed it or don't know what to do with it. So he created the Freedmen's Bank. And it was where blacks could, deposit their money, learn about money. Within 10 years after slavery, these are in those dollars, these are in those days, the Freedmen's Bank depositors amassed $57 million. In those days, they built banks, they built community centers, they built, Lincoln was the first one who really saw, the potential, one of the first people of the black economy. And
so there's $57 million.
57 million. It would have been over $6 trillion in the black economy.
$6 trillion in today's money.
In today's money. That would have been in the black community growing.
Right.
And due to corruption, and what ultimately the money was used to build the Treasury Annex building, which is why when he was Treasury Secretary, Lou renamed it the Freedmen's Bank. But they actually asked Frederick Douglass to come in and try to save the Freedmen's Bank, and he had $12,000 in it. These were wealthy people in those days.
Sure.
He had $12,000 in it. And he said the bank can't be saved, so he asked Congress to do what the FDIC does now and guarantee the deposits up to 65%. Congress said yes, and they didn't do it. They used that money to build the Treasury Annex. You have that. You have around the Great Migration, and I did some research with the Equal Justice Institute. That Great Migration North, where you had 5 million blacks walk away from land that's worth trillions of dollars today, was largely due to lynching. The fear of lynching played a much bigger role. You had redlining, when it was against the law to lend money for blacks to buy real estate during the greatest land grab in history, and real estate is one of the ways you pass on generational wealth. So we weren't participating in these things. Predatory lending. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King just as he was about to take on economic rights. We've had some blows that have left economic, emotional, and psychological damage to the point where blacks don't trust the financial services industry. When you think of that history, and then you look at the reality, the black households in the United States earning $75,000 or more, or $200,000 or more, are the fastest growing income group. It's incredible. Black women, fastest growing entrepreneurs, despite all of those challenges. So people can learn something from us. We have over $1 trillion worth of buying power, meaning if we were our own country, we would be the 15th wealthiest country in the world. So how do we step into our power and, empower ourselves? The resources are there, and then what I've seen is the mindset really has to change, and that's what I'm committed to.
So what's the first step about changing our minds about money?
Realizing that there's a lot more to us than our minds. And people really have to understand that, you know, we were born with everything that we need in order to achieve our goals. And that conditioning, messages from the outside, have a way of sneaking their way in and us letting them define us. Like, you know, blacks are not good with money. Women are not good with money. Money's always going to be a struggle. Well, you know, remember the witness. And kind of, you know, learning how to step out of your own tendencies and seeing what they are, not so that, you know, we don't want to get into our, you know, I saw money handled like this as a child. We don't want to get into, you know, our drama, but you want to know when you're triggered, so when you need to tell yourself a different message. And for blacks, every time we get into that negative thinking, really taking a look what our ancestors have done. We're just a few generations from slavery, and we've amassed over $1 trillion in wealth.
That is fantastic. At the close of each program, we ask our guests to finish the statement, "The power or the strength of Black America lies in." How would you finish that?
It's a shining example of resilience.
Of resilience. And you think that we can recover from this, from the multiple setbacks we've had in using this pot of money that we have available to us?
I think we have to step out of recovery mode and turn around and say, look at what I've done. I'm at the table. What can we do together?
Well, Stacey Tisdale, thank you so much for being with us and encouraging us and doing the research and sharing it with us. This is phenomenal. I will see you on June 26th.
Yes, you will.
At the
Paley Center.
Yeah, Black women, money, feminism.
And empowerment.
And empowerment. Great. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you so much to you all out there for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we will see you the next time.